Hello and welcome to a new episode of Rants with Danny Shi. Today is March 1st. We are 1/6 through 2025. Gosh, time passed so quickly. And we are going to react to the horrifying, um, I don't want to say disgusting, but terrifying World Baseball Classic qualifier for my heart, not for the team. I think that the team did what it could, and I think that the team did best that they could at the circumstances and the cards that they were being dealt. But certainly not a fun weekend in the last week for yours truly. And man, it was. I joked about it, and I don't know how real it was because jokes sometimes are funny because they're part of the truth. But I honestly, for the first time since like college, I was like, oh my gosh, like, do I need to um think about going to therapy? Because for one, it's very clear to me that this team matters a lot. To an extent, it matters too much. But the scary, the fear of embarrassment, I think, was so severe that um, it it. When I was driving at times last weekend, you're just in your car and you're just, even with music on, you're just in your head a little bit and just like, gosh, like how bad can this be? It was pretty bad. My mind was pretty bad back last weekend, and I learned a couple of things about myself. One is that I really care about this team, and two, gyms. Going to the gym and having a workout, man, that's therapeutic. In the last 6 months, I've learned a lot about myself, which was one, this podcast is very therapeutic. It's one of the key motivation for me to keep going because sometimes I just need to vent and just talk about things. Last year during the World Series, or after the World Series, in fact, I rented and I talked about how therapeutic that was without having the opportunity to just vent out what I thought at the time. I don't know where that would have went. It probably would have gone to people that don't deserve it, but this microphone, unfortunately, it's going to take a lot of the heat, or did take a lot of the heat back in October of 2024. The second thing that's very therapeutic for me is going to the gym. It turns out that whenever, I drive to the gym, like the 20-minute drive, not dark thoughts, I wasn't going to kill myself, but it was just like, God, like how I was just in a very, very bad mood, and much worse than anything the Premier 12 has thrown at me. I think I would say probably as bad as the Panama game back in 2023, but that was just one game, like one terrible game. I had to live with it for about 48 hours before Taiwan played the following game against Italy. But this past weekend, it was, you lost to Spain. The game almost ended early for mercy rule. The game almost ended in the 7th inning because Spain was up by 10. But Taiwan closed it to a 9-run deficit. Then they scored 2 pretty much meaningless runs in the 9th inning to make it 12-5, to make it look a little bit better. But Spain controlled the majority of that game, especially the second half. And Taiwan goes out there and wins game 2 against South Africa. And I thought that the first game was Friday morning, my time. And that evening I was texting, and some of you probably got some of these texts, which was, I would not know what to do with myself if Taiwan loses to South Africa. And I didn't expect it to, I didn't expect to lose to South Africa, but man, oh man, like there was a very clearly a non-zero chance Taiwan was going to lose to South Africa, and man, that was, just the thought of it, you know, disgusted me, and thankfully we won that game, so a little bit of confidence was gained. Game 3, I'm gonna be honest with you, because the way that the games played out, Game 3 was going to be a non-factor for Taiwan, but it meant everything for Nicaragua, because if Nicaragua had beaten Taiwan, they would have gone to the World Baseball Classic, without playing the playoff game. But Taiwan at the time, there was no way for Taiwan to win the TQR between Spain and Nicaragua and Taiwan, because Taiwan gave up 12 runs, and there was no way that Spain didn't give up enough. So there was really no way for Taiwan to win that TQR battle. So Taiwan was guaranteed to play in the Tuesday game. Doesn't matter what the result was, basically. And so coming into that particular game, in the Premier 12, Taiwan played 2 meaningless games. Meaningless meaning like the games it wouldn't matter for advancement or qualification for the next round. But in both of those games, the first one against Cuba and the second one against Japan, both teams didn't have anything to play for. So in the first game, Cuba was already eliminated, so they just had to play that final game. In the second meaningless game, it was the final game of the super round between Taiwan and Japan. Both teams had qualified for the championship, so essentially they're really just playing for home field advantage for the championship, I believe. But even then, Taiwan will have to, to really get, if you want to go for it, you still have to go through TQR and everything. So I'm not sure how it would have played out. But anyway, both teams at the time basically didn't have anything to play for. In the Taiwan-Nicaragua game, it was the exact opposite. One team had nothing to play for. The other team had everything to play for. If Nicaragua had lost, then they have to go into TQR with Spain and, who else? I don't know what would happen, but Nicaragua certainly doesn't want to get into that scenario. So they were going to go all out. So you had one team that had nothing to play for and one team that had everything to play for, which made the 6-0 result explainable. But I didn't feel any worse. I didn't feel any better. Actually, I probably thought a little bit better. But the way that Taiwan was shut out in Game 3 between Taiwan and Nicaragua, that made the feelings felt a lot worse, because you're thinking, okay, you scored in the Spain game, you basically scored 2 meaningless runs, so you scored 3 meaningful runs in that game. Actually, more like 2, because one of them you were down 12-2, right? And then it was 12-3 and then 12-5. In Nicaragua, you got shut out. And you're just like, gosh, like, how are we in this predicament where it doesn't feel like Taiwan has any advantage over Nicaragua and Spain? We discussed the fact that nationality rules last episode. We talked about recruitment. We talked about any of those things. But at the end of the day, and we talked about pitching limit and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, every single team had to go through the nationality requirements, and every single team had to go through the pitch limit requirement, especially. So on that front, everybody's on the same boat. How has Taiwan gotten to a point where you're going into a sudden death match between yourself and Spain, and you're coming off being shut out? Now, again, the result by itself didn't really mean much to me. It's just the fact that you got shut out. And going into the Spanish game, you're just thinking, gosh, like, it was terrible. It felt terrible. Admittedly, I did not watch the majority of the Spanish game. despite being a pretty good time for my time zone. 6 o'clock in the morning, going to the office at 8 o'clock and stuff like that. But I admittedly did not watch. I did not want to think about it. I did not want to. When I woke up in the middle of the night, like early in the morning, sometimes I do that. Before I'm supposed to wake up, I kind of just look at my phone and go back to bed. I did not want to think about it. I did not open Facebook, which is where I get a lot of the Taiwanese news. I did not open anything. I did not want to learn anything about those games because there was no win for me. You either beat Spain as expected and go into the World Baseball Classic as expected, or you get humiliated and you miss a golden opportunity to play some of your best players in Taiwan. Yu Chang, Zhu Weilin, Li Haoyu, all the pitchers that showed out in the last couple of games. Outside of the Spanish game, some of the talent that you see from those games really are not that terrible. And in the Premier 12, coming off a huge momentum swing. And I was thinking at the time, who else outside of Taiwan would have been so pissed at performance? And in reality, the World Baseball the World Baseball Softball Confederation would have been disgusted if Taiwan had missed the World Baseball Classic. Because imagine you're competing, your Premier 12, your feature event, the championship of your featured event, going into another tournament that you're kind of competing with, and your champion got knocked out outside of the top 16. Outside of the top 20. How ridiculous would that have been? But Taiwan, look, the fourth game, it's all about momentum for Taiwan. And they came out with the lead. So many opportunities for Spain to actually come back in that game. So many. I mean, I watched the full game highlights again yesterday. I was like, look, baseball is a fair game. Honestly, there are so many momentum swings like that I can't explain. If you leave players stranded on the base path, the next inning, the other team will come back and put you in the same situation. It feels that way. Like there's obviously it's not a real thing or not a rules thing, but like that's how baseball felt over and over and over. Is that if you don't capture your opportunity, you have to work extra hard the next inning because that's when the other team has it. Probably normally have the largest effort in doing the same to you, or their comeback or stuff like that. Spain cut the lead down really, really quickly, down to 1 run every single time Taiwan got a more than 1 run lead until like the 5th inning. In the 4th inning, the inning right before Spain threw the 2 errors to first base, they squandered like a man on first is second, nobody out situation. And they hit into a double play and then a strikeout to end the 5th inning. And you're just like, in the following inning, Taiwan goes in there. Was it a hit and then a steal and then just 2 missed throws to first base? It happened back to back. And you're just thinking, like, coming back, you're just reading that game. You're like, wow, like, baseball is kind of a fair game, and it's not one of those things where it's just, this is a one-time sample. It happens all the time in baseball, all the time. You miss your opportunity, the next inning, the other team is gonna put on runs, like as if baseball's punishing you for not gaining that advantage. The following innings, the Spain they had bases loaded, 1 out. To me, that was. Taiwan should have never been in that situation. Shiroshi was clearly out of gas. He was throwing, he already threw 3 innings. It's again, you're coming off an off season. 3 innings of very high intensity baseball, and he basically threw a very non-competitive at bat. Gave up a 4-pitch walk. The last one bounced like in front of home plate. Then you bring in Suile, basically a pro sophomore, coming into this game. Walk first. I don't understand why they didn't give him a clean inning. Maybe there's some pitch count consideration. Maybe you're thinking Shiroshi's your ace. Didn't love that decision, to be honest with you. But I think that would be one of the decisions you look back. If things had gone south, you look back, you go, you should have given Soinle a clean inning to start. Now, he settled down, he had 2 immense strikeouts. The first one was a changeup. Now, to be honest with you guys, after like the 6th inning, I started watching. I woke up at 8 o'clock and I had it watching because I'd go to the office at 8:30. Anyway, so I watched a few innings, and those were the 2. It was like bases loaded, 1 out. Soinle gets to a 3-1 count. 3-1 count with the pressure of the world on the shoulder of a very young pitcher that just got into the pros last year. He's going to approach his 2nd season as a professional baseball player. All of the pressure on this one guy, and he throws 2 straight changeups. And I like it was incredible. Like obviously as a hitter you're expecting the 95, 94 in the zone, but Taiwan comes back with 2 changeups. I would say this though. The second changeup, if you go back and watch the highlights, the second changeup, the guy should have swung. The guy had to swing at it, to hack it, to extend it. You can't just it's not one of those pitches that like it's like at the corner and like it comes back door to you. No, it was, you look at that pitch, it was in the strike zone the entire time. It was a pitch that, like, and the commentator said it right away. Like it was a pitch that at that situation you had to swing at it. But strikeout there, momentum comes back a little bit to Taiwan's side, and then high fastball to strike out the second guy. You're like, and then Taiwan gets out the jam, and the game has kind of felt settled since then, especially after in the top of the 8th inning, which is again right after the 2 strikeout sequence. Top of the 8th inning, Taiwan comes back and gets an insurance run without getting a hit. It was a hit by pitch steal, and then a passed ball or wild pitch, I don't know which one it was, that brought the runner to third, a walk, and then a sacrifice fly. Taiwan gets a run without getting a single hit. That at that point you're like, this game is pretty much settled. Now again, it's easy to say that now looking back, but 6 outs, you got to score 3 runs. It's against some of the best pitchers from Taiwan. It's difficulties up there, and Taiwan was not messing around anymore. They're sending their absolute best pitchers. So that's just game 4. I want to talk, but I want to address a lot of reactions domestically. I mean, domestically, like in Taiwan and abroad, because obviously, in the international baseball community, was shocked, and so was I, about how Taiwan performed. And the notion that Taiwan sent their B team to this qualifier and sent their A team to the Premier 12, I can't stand it. That is categorically false. Taiwan did not. Well, okay. Let me say this another way. You look at the roster. You're saying the age difference between the two. Taiwan obviously sent their B team. That's the logic of thinking there. I understand it, but it's incorrect. You look at the players that dropped out from the World Baseball Classic qualifier roster. You got Zheng Zongzhe, who was a Pirate, that dropped out because he had a major league baseball spring training invite. He committed to play. Lyle Lynn, nothing against Lyle Lynn. I think he should have gone to the A's and should have gone to spring training, but he dropped out. And he also played in the Premier 12. You're thinking, there's the Hao-Yu Lee, the Hao-Yu on the Phillies. He wasn't part of this roster. Gu Ling-Rui on the pitcher that's gone to Japan. He dropped out. Chen Zihao, the right fielder who just broke the $100 million New Taiwanese dollar value contract value, like he broke that record. He was supposed to be, a right-handed right field slugger. He dropped out. Third baseman Liu Jihong, he's probably one of the most talented hitters in Taiwan. He's had a couple of bad years, but in terms of talent, in terms of development, in terms of where he is in his career, he's much more advanced than some of the other fielders on there up in the roster. He's not on the roster either because he was in such a bad form. My point is, look at the players that dropped out. Those are either Major League Baseball spring training invites, or bona fide starter / all-star from the CPBL, or people that just gone to Japan, like Gu Ling-Rui, for example. Those are some of the best players that was going to play in this qualifier, but they dropped out due to other reasons. And if you're sitting here and saying Taiwan, that the coaching staff or the CPBL who organizes these national teams, by the way, they sat down and they decided, we're just going to send our B team to the qualifier. That is not what happened. When you see the Premier 12 roster, a lot of the best players did not play in that game. Yu Cheng is not on that roster. Lin Zuwei is not on that roster. Gu Ling-Rui is not on the roster. Xu Ruoxi, the pitcher in Game 4, who threw a 3 1/3, one of the probably right now the best domestic player in the league, he didn't play. My point is, when they picked the Premier 12 roster, they had this qualifier in mind, thinking we had to split into two squads. We had to split into two equally good squads, because you can't have the same players that play in the Premier 12 who ended their season a month and a half later than everybody else, then having to ramp up for a preseason tournament a month and a half earlier than everybody else, because then they will have no off season. These players are not national team. They are national team players, but their primary jobs are players for their own teams, not the national team. They shouldn't have to take on the risk of ruining their entire career just for this national team. I'm a national teams guy. I told you how bad I felt during the weekend that we were down, that we lost to Spain and Nicaragua. I told you I thought about going to therapy. That's how much I love this team, and that's how much I care about this team. But I'm sitting here and telling you right now, there's not a single player that deserves to have their entire off season gone away just for a national team, just to play on these national teams. These are professional baseball players. They're not professional national team players. We're not doing a Soviet Union ice hockey team. That's not how we're doing it. And so you had to split into two different squads. And the two squads were evenly matched. If at full strength, I'm talking about without dropouts, those are quite evenly matched teams. Look at the pitching staff on the World Baseball Classic qualifier. I'm just going to call it qualifier now. You look at the pitching staff on this qualifier roster. The stuff that they have overmatches the stuff that the Premier 12 roster has. Now, the Premier 12 pitching staff did a better job, but overall, but you look at pure stuff, top end stuff, the amount of top end pitchers that the qualifier pitchers had, the qualifier pitchers were better. And you look at the hitters on the teams of the qualifier team, I would grant you this: the Premier 12 roster, the depths of some of the best hitters are probably a little bit deeper. I would say a lot, but the talent on this qualifier roster without dropouts, Chen Zihao, Yu Cheng, Zhu Weilin, Chen Jiexian, right? Liu Jihong would have been on the team. I mean, it's not that big of a drop-off, but the problem with this qualifier roster is when you have the drop-off, when you have the dropouts happen, who are you going to for replacements? That was the issue. The issue wasn't the talent on the planned roster, which was I wouldn't say an A team, but it was like A minus B plus team for both sides. It's not they didn't just decide to disrespect the qualifier and sent a young team. That wasn't what happened. The dropouts happened. They had to fish for replacements. Now, they had decided that they're not going back to the Premier 12 roster to play this qualifier because of the same reason I talked about. You don't let a player to not have any offseason, basically playing from 2024 March all the way to 2025 October, because if they're playing a CPBL schedule, with no rest in the middle. That's not how it works. You can't do that. If you have a problem with that, we're not on the same wavelengths here. But they had to pick somebody that's not on the Premier 12 roster, and they had to pick somebody that are ready for a game. Because think about it, both tournaments, they asked for, well, Taiwan had a 35 training camp roster, 35-man training camp roster. The final roster is 28. So, but they basically bring 35 to camp. Okay, so for both tournaments, they bring 35. So it means they need 70 players to fill both rosters, to prepare for both rosters. Okay, so out of the gate, you're taking the top 70 players out of the way, out of it, because when you're fishing replacements, you can't pick the Premier 12 rosters, and obviously all the remainder, the remaining players that did not play in the Premier 12 are already on this qualifying roster. So that's top 70, right? And then so you have to go below it. If you count, like, if you rank the best players in Taiwan, you go from 1, and you have to, out of the blue, you're already taking the top 70 players out of the way. And then so you're now picking the players outside of the 70. Now you're including right? You have dropouts and stuff like that. So you have to go below 70 to find your players. Now, that's the first difficulty. In the Premier 12, you basically only had to pick outside the 35 because the Premier 12 happened first. So you don't have the problem of, we're going to leave, if they have you have to take replacements. You have to go, this guy, we're definitely going to pick him for the qualifier. So we're not going to pick him. That's less of a concern. That's one, because the Premier 12 happened first. And then secondly, imagine going to a player saying, hey, by the way, we need, are you ready for a game tomorrow? They're like, no, I just started throwing 2 or 3 weeks ago because the season starts a month after. Right? How many players right now outside of the qualifying roster was ready for a big time high intensity baseball game? None of them. Probably very few of them. And you probably said, well, why don't the coaching staff alert more players outside the 35 just to have some, just in case for replacement? Imagine you go into a player and say, hey, we need you to start gearing up for a game or for a tournament a month and a half to a month earlier than your usual off-season workout schedule. And they go, okay, do I have a spot? Like, no, we don't really have a spot for you. But just in case, though, I want you to ramp up your preparation, get your body ready for a high-intensity game. Just in case, though, basically extend your baseball season by a month and a half. But maybe you'll play, maybe not. Not only might you not play, you're not probably going to be on the roster. Not only you're probably not going to be on the roster, you're not going to be on the training camp roster. Can you imagine yourself as a player, you get that news, you're like, no, we're not doing it. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to go on my normal routine, get ready for end of March, get ready for games in late March and not late February. If I was a player, I would have done the same thing. I wouldn't have blamed them one bit if the coaching staff comes in here and says, you don't have a spot in the training camp roster, but please get ready. So how many players were actually ready to play when you're fishing for replacements? So when you're fishing for replacements, you can't pick players out of the Premier 12 roster. So you're going above, like below the 70 player threshold, and you're basically saying, and you have to pick players that are ready to play. So how far deeper? Like, it's not just you can't just pick next man up at that point because they might not be ready. And so how deep do you have to get in your basically a player pool to get these two rosters, especially the second one, which is a lot tougher to put together, to play in this tournament? My situation is my rant is just about this, which is to sit here and say that the coaching staff or this team is disrespecting Spain, is disrespecting Nicaragua, is disrespecting South Africa by sending their young guys because they think they're too good to send their best. That is not true. That is not how it went down. And I'm not part of the team, so I don't know this. Just from the outside looking at how it ended up, and think about the situations that was happening. Just imagine yourself in that situation. They didn't just send their second team because they wanted to, because that's all they had. If we had 70 Shohei Ohtanis in Taiwan, we would have just sent them for both. Why are we playing around, playing with our food, if we could just overpower the qualifier teams? Right? We didn't just overlook. I mean, we knew how. We knew how. Look, the Spain, Nicaragua, South Africa, especially Spain and Nicaragua, because of the nationality rules, they sent players. No disrespect to Spain and Nicaragua, they sent players that are better than their overall baseball might. They were able to find players that are better than how good they actually are in baseball. My point is, the nationality rules benefited them much more than they benefited Taiwan, which is fine. I mean, I talked about how bad it normally goes for us, but for Taiwan, not only do other teams get stronger because of the national team, but our team got weaker because of the Premier 12, having to play in both. Now, that's not an excuse, because Taiwan, basically, we got nobody else to blame but ourselves having to play in both of these tournaments, because on the one hand, you are a baseball powerhouse comparatively, so you do get to play in the Premier 12, but then you screwed up so bad in the previous Classic that you have to play in the qualifier. So I'm not sitting here and saying we got screwed, because we basically knew we got nobody else to blame but ourselves to be in this situation. But this was an immense test on the depth of the Taiwanese baseball national pool. And I would say we passed it, not by flying colors, but we passed it. World Championship in the Premier 12. Now, that did come with a lot of luck, because, losing 3 games during the way, but still winning the championship. Pretty rare in a tournament-style thing. But we won a World Championship, and we got ourselves back in the Classic. It wasn't pretty, especially in the qualifier. It was not pretty, but we got it done. And to be honest with you, and this is gonna sound very arrogant. This is gonna sound, I don't, I don't think it's gonna sound good at all. But if you give like a Korea, Japan, screw it, you give the same schedule to Australia, would they have done the same thing? Would they have done the same? Colombia was not in the Premier 12, I think. Yeah, they don't. Oh, maybe they were. I'm not sure. Let's see. It's Colombia. Premier 12 Group A. Is Colombia the other team that had to play both? No, Colombia did not play in the Premier 12. So, yeah, Taiwan is the only team that had to play both. If you make other countries have to go through the same schedule, well, maybe they would have done a little bit better because, again, with the nationality rules, a lot of the other countries, Taiwan is probably the least benefited country or team to from this nationality rule. Like we have 2 players that we can look at, Corbin Carroll and Stuart Fairchild. That's it. I mean, look at how many of the how many players that some of the other teams, like the British, for example. What kind of a team? Look at the benefits, the added strength that they will get from the World Baseball Classic rules versus a normal international tournament rules. It's not on the same level, but yeah, geez, we got past it. We did. So again, I felt a little bad when you look at, first of all, I feel bad for the Spanish third baseman, but I also feel bad for some of the players on this qualifier because a lot of them is not going to play. A lot of them are not going to play in the actual Classic, but they had to go through the pressure of this qualifier. I honestly, to be honest with you, I think players on this roster, on this qualifier roster, would have faced much harder, much higher level of pressure than the actual Classic roster. I think the 2023 World Baseball Classic roster got a lot of pressure because we lost to Panama, and that's a team that you should not have lost to. I sit here today saying we should not have lost to Panama. Imagine we beat Panama and we go play Australia in the quarterfinals. Maybe we beat Australia in the semifinals, but we should have not lost to Panama. Should never have lost to Panama. Lost to Panama. That's when the pressure kicked in. But people were just gonna be happy if Taiwan went 1-3 in that tournament, losing to Cuba, the Dutch, and the Italians, but beat Panama because that was where we were. But this qualifier, people was expecting 3 straight wins. And you listen to my last podcast, 3 straight wins. I was worried for Nicaragua about how they would face Taiwan in Game 3 because they have to save arms for the game, the last game against Spain. Man, oh man, I was so dumb. But I did say, I did have worries about this roster, Taiwanese roster, because you look at it like there's a lot of TSG Hawks players on that team. And no offense to the Hawks, but as a expansion team, there is no way a standard or regular national team would have picked that many players from an expansion team. And this is another thing I want to bring up, which is like, if we had decided to play our younger players, why didn't we pick younger players from across the CPBL and not all, like we had a lot of younger, like you look at the number of young players on this national team, a lot of them are from the Hawks. A lot. And if we had decided back in November, after the Premier 12, we just go, oh, we're the champions. So we're just going to send our second team to the qualifier because we're going to smoke Nicaragua and Spain anyway. Would you have thought that maybe we would have picked other players or play more fairly across the teams. Not saying everybody gets 2, but like 6 young players from the TSG Hawks. That's tied for most. That is unusual. And you know why they went to the Hawks for a lot of the replacements? Because they started their spring training in middle of January. Because they can, because they have younger players and they need the reps and they need the experience to compete with other teams. So they started camp in the middle of January when they had the most amount of time to prepare and they're probably most in game shape versus other teams. And so when you're Taiwan, you're looking for replacements. They played the Hawks twice, by the way, before facing the Lotte Giants twice. They're familiar with the Hawks players. They understand where they are because they just played them twice, and clearly they're most in game shape because they started camp in the middle of January. They were, to me, if it looked like to me, they were in emergency mode looking for replacements, because when you have to go outside of your training camp roster for players to make the final 28-man roster, that means something has gone wrong. That means players that came to your camp either are so much worse or so much worse in their form or not so much worse in terms of preparation, not because of talent, or injuries. Clearly, they had to go outside. They picked one guy outside of the 35-man training roster for the final 28. So that to me is an indication that Taiwan just wasn't. It wasn't like Taiwan is overlooking the qualifier, which a lot of people were saying we were. Look, when the Premier 12 team roster came out, people said that was the B team. Okay, so either you just have no respect for the national teams, because every time you see a player, you see players, they're the B team. They must be bad. Well, they're bad. They must be the B team. You either have no respect for the players, or wait, I kind of lost my train of thought there. Or you're just a troll. I mean, if you're a troll, you're a troll. That's fine. But I don't think I think you can say we were unprepared, but I don't think that was by design. I don't think we overlooked it. I think because of the situation we were in, we were caught short-handed, rather than we just decided to not take this tournament seriously. I also want to talk about this is more domestic. Like in Taiwan, people have said that the tournament structure helped Taiwan because you could have, we ended the group stage or round robin, 1 wins, 2 losses. We were third, but how the tournament works, the second, third place team plays in the finals. Not the finals, but one more game for the final spot. And you're like, and Taiwan, basically how it played out, that structure benefited Taiwan because we lost 2 games and we lost to Spain once, and we actually got smoked by Spain, but we beat them in the one game that mattered. If that's your way of thinking, I'm also here to say I disagree with that way of thinking, because it's not like this final game was announced after the round robin games were done. If we sit here today and said not Taiwan, out of the 4 teams after round robin, only the top 2 teams will make it. Case closed. I guarantee you Taiwan would have played Spain differently in game 1. Because you look at the pitchers and you look at the strategies that Taiwan sent out there against Spain, and you look at the pitchers that threw after that in the 4 games that we played, how Taiwan kind of saved their best arms for the final game, and you count the number of pitchers that the coaches that had real trust in, and they were pretty accurate, by the way. If you count the South Africa game, Chen Boyi pitched in that game. Xu Ruoxi pitched, and basically, let's just count the final Spanish game. Zhang Chengzhong, the starter for the Spanish game. Sui Yilei, another pitcher on another pitcher that pitched in the final game. You look at it and you just, Taiwan probably only had 6 or 7 guys that the coaching staff deemed good enough for Nicaragua and Spain. And if you look at how it played out, if Taiwan had gotten all in, against Spain, and you lose that game, or let's just say you win that game, right? You play South Africa, let's say you get through that. You go against Nicaragua, and you ran out of pitchers because of pitching limits set by the teams, or just the lack of high quality pitchers that you have. Now you lose to Nicaragua, and you lose the TQR battle, or at least you don't finish first in TQR battle. You have to play in Game 7 anyway. You have to play in the 4th game anyway, and you would have actually ran out of pitchers for the 4th game. And you look at the offense in this qualifier. Can you really trust this offense to win you games? And so, if we sit here today, my point is, if we sit here today and say, okay, the top 2 round robin teams are going to go into the championship, Taiwan would have used some of their players, some of the best pitchers against Spain, because you had to win. Because not only you have to win at least 2 games, but even then by TQR you might lose, but you had to win at least 2. At the very bare minimum 2. You want to win all 3, and you need to basically win. You can't get blown out, right? Basically, you can't get blown out in any of your losses. And so they would have played it differently. They would have sent more of their better pitchers for the Spanish game in the first game, and at least try to limit it as much as they could, rather than what happened in this first Spanish game was you're down by 2 in the 5th inning, and they were still trying to stretch out some of their younger guys, which at that point they've limited to 4 runs, but they were kind of on their last legs, and it was just like, okay, when are you going to bring in your top bullpen arms? If you look at the pitchers we brought out in that Spanish game, we didn't really even bring out our best bullpen arms. But that was a risk that the coaching staff could take, because they're thinking we just quote unquote we need 1 win. We beat South Africa, and we will most likely be in the 4th game. And now, especially after South Africa lost Game 1 against Nicaragua, they spent their best pitchers there. You're thinking South Africa probably not going to get a win. Even then, you win the TQR because you beat South Africa, so you would rank above South Africa there. So you're going to go into the 4th game, and so might as well keep your chips and go into the 4th game. Now, I'm gonna sit here and say I don't love that decision. I thought even with this format, I thought maybe Taiwan should have been a little bit more aggressive than my liking, but that's their way of thinking. And you're saying, why? Well, you have so many top-end arms. I'm going to tell you this. We have no idea what kind of pitching limits the pitcher's home team or mother team had put on them. No idea. 2 innings max, sometimes 60 pitches max, 40 pitches max. We have no idea. I don't think by tournament rules, I think we had enough top arms to stretch it out. But with the team's limits being put on those pitchers, I don't think we did. I'm gonna sit here and say, based on the way, how conservative we played, part of it is just probably just a difference of thinking. But how conservative we play, though, there's a very good chance the minor league pitchers had some really strict limits on them. I do think so, and that's just the way it is for us. That's just the way until the World Baseball Classic becomes bigger than Major League Baseball, which is never. I don't think it's ever going to happen, because why would MLB make it that way? Why would they make their World Baseball Classic product more important than their actual key feature product, which is Major League Baseball regular season or postseason? I don't think that's going to happen. I think there's much more revenue being. Well, we can talk about that later. I don't think that's ever going to happen. I think they're going to make it close, but Major League Baseball teams will never view the World Baseball Classic as important or even more important than their own seasons. And as long as that's a fact, as long as that's a thing, then these players will get their limits. They will not be allowed to, or they will be put restrictions on them by the teams outside of the game rules. The rules of the World Baseball Classic, like the 4-day rest after 85 pitches, stuff like that. So that's the game. That's the rules of the game. To be fair, every team has to face these problems. So it's not just a Taiwanese roster thing. Now that's not an excuse. But the cards that you're being dealt, the innings and the restrictions that you're being put on, I think those were the reasons why Taiwan played so conservative in Game 1 against Spain, especially you were trailing early and you never took a lead. They took South Africa, made sure that you're in the final game, and you basically roll your dice for Game 7. Or not Game 7, for the 4th game. Because I think their understanding is they didn't have the pitching depth to deal with 3 straight games. Especially 2 of them are against very, very good teams in Spain and Nicaragua. I mean, have you seen those teams? Have you seen how they play? They're very good. And Taiwan, I don't think, had the offense to deal with it. So I'm glad we passed the test. It wasn't pretty. It was, like I said in the last episode, it was a perfect place for disappointment, and it almost came. But it came in a way where yourself if you're a Taiwanese baseball fan, or Team Taiwan fan, which normally aren't the same, but sometimes there's a lot of correlation, there's a lot of overlap, but there are still differences. You basically got slapped awake. The dream is over. Well, not really. Now I'm still dreaming, but the high, the sugar high after that championship went away. After that Premier Title Championship went away. And is that a bad thing? I don't think so. I think we still qualified, so the CBBO, I think this season is still going to get a lot of fans, but some of the momentum was lost. But I think that's a good thing. I think all of us got brought back to earth a little bit, and I think I want to talk about this in a later episode, but it's an alarm as well to the CPBL. You know, when you rank your best Taiwanese players, you go after, so from 70 and below, you're basically in a struggle with some of the indie ball players or retired Major League Baseball players, which is probably not a bad thing to think about. Probably not bad, but I don't think that level of player in Taiwan, like I'm talking about like after top 70, those players are never really challenged at a high level. They probably go to the Asian Games, play some amateur players, but they're not. We don't really. There hasn't been a real gauge on how good they are. But now we do. Now we know what it feels like. And if you think like 70, if you go for like 70-ish, is let's say the top 10 are all in the minor league system or in Japan, then you're talking about in the CPBL, you're talking about fringe starter level players are indie ball to single A level players. Again, these are very arbitrary and very not scientific, but just think about it. Like that's the idea. Okay, fringe / bench first army players in the CPPL. It's around indie ball to high A, maybe some freshly retired Major League Baseball player level players. Is that a bad thing? I don't know. I don't think so. You certainly want that to be leveled up, but I don't think it's a terribly bad place to be. But you certainly want to get better, and now you know where you are. You almost did not make top 6, top 20 in a international tournament. That's where we are. If you bring your fringe starters from the CPPL to play in this tournament, you'll, again, WBC nationality rules are laxed. So outside of top 20 in the WBC is probably not the worst in the world, but that's where you are. You're not going to be top 20. You're not going to be a top 20 team in the World Baseball Classic if you bring a 70, a fringe starting roster, a fringe starter roster. Again, nothing wrong with that. You want to improve upon that, but that's where we are. All right, that is it for today's Reigns with Denny Shi. Today is, again, March 1st, and I've had, again, this is very therapeutic. If you enjoyed the show, let me know. You can DM me on Twitter. Let me know. A lot of rants today. Thankfully, thank God we passed it. Thank God we're through. I can't imagine. Well, I could. I did for a little bit. I did on Monday. What would have happened if Taiwan didn't make it? But no, that's in the rear view mirror. And then we have a full season ahead of CPBL baseball. And then we got the actual World Baseball Classic coming up in 2026. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you guys next time.